Hi, and welcome to the first semi-final for Marvel Battleground. I'm Malcolm, and I'm hosting this, and it's going to be a really interesting match because we've got the person who knocked me out of the tournament, Tim Brzakala, facing off against Nicholas Twohig. But before I go to them, we've got some wonderful judges. First up, we've got Troy. I don't know your last name, I just know you know your name's Troy. Judging, how are you feeling about this match?
Oh, I'm really excited. I think there's some great questions today and should be a good battle between two good competitors. Looking forward to it.
And also here judging is, and also doing the timekeeping is Joe. Joe, how are you feeling about this matchup today?
I'm feeling well. Marvel Battleground is an amazing tournament that we have going on. I'm excited to see two great competitors. I didn't judge either of their matches, so I don't know their fighting styles, but I'm excited to see it play out tonight.
And someone whose fighting style who I do know quite well, we've got Tim Brzakala. Tim, how are you feeling about facing Nicholas tonight?
I'm excited. I love Marvel, so naturally I am pumped to argue about these questions. I've never met or talked to Nicholas before, but I'm sure he's a great guy. I'm sure we'll be very civil, but it'll be exciting. I'm pumped to play tonight.
And Nicholas, how are you feeling about playing Tim tonight?
You're going down, Tim. No, I'm just kidding. We'll be cool. No, it's gonna be a good time. I was really nervous because I've also never seen Tim, and I've never seen Troy either. So when I first saw you two, I kind of thought Troy was Tim, and I was like, "Oh man, that beard! I'm very intimidated." Now I'm feeling much better having seen Tim. So
yeah, don't worry. I'm just judging your fate.
I think it'll be a fun time. Fair warning: I've never lost in round 2 of anything because I'm usually out in round 1. But let's get it going.
But without any further ado, let's get this started. It's time, like the openings. How this works is you get 4 questions, all prepped, and they're all prepped, and they get an opening of 90 seconds. Got a freeform debate of 5 minutes, and you got a closing of 1 minute. And I believe they do it here, but if they want, they can extend their opening or closing for an extra minute if they feel like they need more time and on those sorts of things. But without any further ado, we'll go to Tim first on the first question, which is, who do you want to see Deadpool meet or face off in the MCU? Hey, you got 90 seconds on the clock. Time will begin when you start talking.
Okay, so the question is, who do I want to see Deadpool meet or face off? So I've kind of taken both of those into account. When we think of Wade Wilson as a character, he's obviously like a comedic, funny character that we've seen in the Deadpool movies with an incredible fighting style, incredible humor and whatnot, and somebody that I think he would clash well with in a positive and fun type of way for a movie experience is Hawkeye, but not just like bows and arrows Hawkeye. I'm thinking more like Ronin, like an Avengers Endgame style Hawkeye. So Clinton Barton, Ronin style. That's who I'm going with. I think that their fighting styles are very similar at this stage. And I think that Wade's humor, clashing and going up against Ronin's kind of more serious demeanor, but then also having some jokes and some lighthearted fun as well, could bring some really fun stuff, whether they're fighting each other or fighting another villain. So I think Ronin would be the best choice.
Right. So, and now we go on to Nicholas. Nick, you've got 90 seconds on the clock, and the time will begin when you start talking.
You know, change scares some people. But this person likes change. I like to see new, interesting things. And something new and interesting I'd like to see is a bit of a buddy cop team-up movie between Deadpool and Shuri. Shuri, a rising character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Princess of Wakanda. the smartest person in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who also happens to have a great wit and is very funny. And I think that could go up really well against Deadpool. I'll save my attack on Tim's choice for the 5-minute round, but say more about Shuri. As I said, she's the smartest. She can outsmart Deadpool. They can have a mental battle, and he will lose very easily. But I would love to see the serious sort of nature of Shuri's intelligence go up against the silly nature of Wade Wilson. So yeah, Shuri, and Tim's choice is bad.
Those were definitely some great openings. Now it's time to go into the 5-minute freeform debate. So 5 minutes is on the clock, and time will begin whenever someone starts talking.
I guess I'll start, and I'll say that I don't think my choice is bad at all. I don't think your choice is necessarily bad either, but the problem is that Shuri as a character just doesn't, I don't think you would get that buddy cop movie you're talking about. I think your movie that you pitched, the buddy cop movie, would actually work better with my choice. I think that Shuri's intellect and everything isn't something that would work well with Deadpool and a buddy cop thing. I think her role is to become the next Black Panther eventually, and she will be a strong enough character on her own. We don't need to bog her down into an R-rated, like, bloody catastrophe thing with Deadpool. We already kind of got part of that with Ronan in Endgame.
Speaking of things we already got, how about Cable? I'm pretty sure the Ronan...
It was terrible.
I disagree, but I also think doing the Ronan... Actually, no, I actually kind of agree. I didn't love it. And Ronan is a very similar character, someone who's seeing tragedy happen in his own family and now is just out for vengeance. It's kind of boring. It's kind of played out. I've already seen it.
No, but we've already seen, that's my point, is we've already seen Ronan like have that thing in Endgame. So I'm not saying that this is him after the events of Endgame. So he's already had the tragedy and everything. Now he can be, this is Deadpool kind of like picking him up and being like, hey, remember, like, stop being so, like, remember when your family all left, ha ha ha. And now, like, he can start to lift up Ronan as a character. Whereas Shuri already has that, like you said, jokey attitude. So her and Deadpool are already kind of there's nowhere to go with that. Whereas with Ronan, you could get a full arc of him becoming more like Deadpool, or him bringing Wade Wilson down to earth a little bit.
So him being Hawkeye again is what I'm hearing.
No, not at all. Because Hawkeye was a throwaway, disposable character in the first movie. And in Age of Ultron, we got more depth with his family, definitely got more depth with Endgame. I'm talking about having him be a fully fledged out character now at this point. Shuri, again, is also a character that, like I said, she's already just the one thing with being the smartest person in the MCU, and she's a great character, but putting her into a movie with Deadpool doesn't make sense, because I want to see Shuri become the next Black Panther, be something important in Wakanda, not running around with Deadpool. Whereas Hawkeye, people don't really like him to begin with, so putting him with Deadpool would make it very interesting for his character.
I would almost think it would make people like Deadpool less, and Shuri can become the Black Panther eventually. It doesn't have to happen right away. We just got Chadwick Boseman back from being dusted. Why are we gonna take away Black Panther from him?
Why can't they? Well, you could say the same thing about Ant-Man and the Wasp. Like, Ant-Man did his thing, and then you brought the Wasp in. They had a team-up movie. You could do the same thing in Black Panther 2, where she gets the herbs or whatever and has the same powers, and they go and team up together. But if you put her in a movie with Deadpool, that you're taking away time from making Shuri better.
I strongly disagree. All the characters she's dealt with so far are she's never dealt with a character as silly as Deadpool, for lack of a better word. I can't think of a better word than silly, but as ridiculous, as eccentric as Deadpool. And I want to see that, because I want to see more of Shuri. You're right, she hasn't been fledged out a whole lot, and this could be something to do that. I think pairing her up, it's really not a pair you'd think of, because it took me a while to think of it. But once I thought of it, I thought it was great, because these personalities would clash. They would work together well. Shuri is probably the only person I can think of who would be able to one-up Deadpool's one-liners in the MCU. Ronan's not doing that. Hawkeye's not doing that. He's just going to be dour the whole time.
But part of the reason people didn't like Deadpool 2 was because it was just joke. People didn't like Guardians 2 because it was joke. So you're telling me we're just going to get Deadpool saying a funny joke and then Shuri saying something funnier? Like, that's not, people don't like that. Where at least with Ronan, you could get something a little more interesting and develop the characters more and more.
I think with Ronan, you'd get joke, but half of them wouldn't land. Because
what's the difference between Deadpool saying jokes in a Ronan movie and Deadpool saying jokes in a Shuri movie?
Shuri's jokes would be funny, Ronan's wouldn't be.
But but Shuri, that's the thing, that's what you're missing. In Deadpool 2 and in Guardians, they just say joke after joke, and it gets tiresome. And it would get tiresome with Shuri.
It's not going to be all jokes. Shuri's the brains of the operation. Deadpool is the brawn, for lack of a better word. And they're going to go out on a cool buddy cop movie. You're describing.
So what is Shuri going to do other than saying jokes and being smart? Because, like I said, I want to see her
very
be.
Useful things in a pair. You're describing the plot of Deadpool 2. He literally had to take a character that was at his lowest, Cable, who's not serious, not funny, and bring him back. I don't need.
But it still makes jokes. Cable makes jokes the whole movie, and not just really. Because he. And I'm not pitching Deadpool 2 because, again, you're not getting past that.
Time on the round.
Right. There was definitely a great main round fight. We've still got the closing to go, and because Tim went first on the opening, Nicholas, you're going first on the closing. Sure. 1 minute is on the clock, and time begins when you start talking.
The Ronan Tim has described is only like that when his family's not around. His family's back now. He's going to go back to being, unfortunately, boring old Hawkeye. I've liked Hawkeye in the past, but he wouldn't pair well with Deadpool. He'd be too similar to Cable, which we just saw, and a lot of people didn't like. We really don't need to see that again. Shuri would be something different, something new, something interesting, a character that a lot of people like and a lot of people want to see more of. And nothing would make people like her even more than they do already than seeing her match wits with Deadpool and actually come on top of him because she's smarter than him and she can outsmart him. They can battle in that sense, and then they can go on a mission together where she's the brains, he's the brawn, and they both have witty banter. I think it'd be way more interesting than Ronan what's being pitched. And I really don't need to see that again. And time.
And 1 minute on the clock. Tim, wrap it up into a nice rebow.
I think my opponent is getting stuck on the fact that Ronan is like Cable, and he's not. Just because his family's back now doesn't mean he's same old boring Hawkeye. He's now arguably one of the greatest Avengers now that we've lost Captain America and Tony Stark. He could do interesting things with Cable. Their styles mesh well, not only in terms of their humor and their characters, but also the like R-ratedness you could get out of a Ronan character. You can't get an R-rated movie with Deadpool and Shuri. That just wouldn't happen. Shuri's brawn, Deadpool's brawn and Shuri's brain. It's an interesting idea where they could go on like a mission, but how do you sustain a whole movie like that? It would just be joke, and there wouldn't be any fun to it after the first 30 minutes because it would all get weighed down by just repetitiveness. We want to see something different, but that would just be more of the same, more Deadpool 2 than what you were saying my thing is, because Cable is actually the really smart character in that film too. So I just don't think Shuri meshes well in any capacity.
Time.
Good job, Tim.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.
That was a great debate. I need time to compose my thoughts. So, Troy, who does your vote go to?
I agree. It was a good battle. Everyone went back and forth pretty well. A little bit of countering each other's arguments. I think Nick's biggest argument for Shuri was that she's one of the smartest people in the MCU. Her outwitting Wade would be one of the funniest parts of it, the buddy cop type movie. And then Tim, the biggest argument, Hawkeye and Wade are really compatible, good fighting style, different kind of senses of humor. I disagree with Nick. I think Tim's right. They have good compatible humor, and the flexibility of being able to go between Hawkeye and Ronan is nice. Nick was right. Ronan's really gone now that Hawkeye has the family back, but the fact that Hawkeye has that flexibility, and I think Tim's right about the fighting style and humor both being compatible. I heard more about how that would be the better movie than just Shuri being funny and too many jokes. So I go with Tim and Hawkeye.
Like my vote's going to go Tim as well. Because I think that Nick's kind of got stuck on the loop when talking about Shuri and say that her jokes and stuff will work well for Wade, and Tim managed to sort of counter, like, why do we need Shuri in a team up for Wade anyway? They could always turn her into a Black Panther kind of sidekick and do like a buddy cop with Black Panther herself. So that kind of hit home, and Nicholas kind of didn't recover from that, but it was still a very close battle. But yeah, so Tim does get this first point. Your next question is, who is the worst villain in a Marvel movie? And because Tim went first on the openings last time, Nicholas, you go first this time. 90
By the way,
seconds
love
is-
both of these picks. Great cuts, great picks, great deep cuts. Love them both. Looking forward to this one.
Nicholas is on the clock first, and 90 seconds begins when you start talking.
What's the one thing that's worse than bad? The answer is bland, folks. And what's more bland than John Travolta at his worst? That's right. I'm talking about Howard Saint from The Punisher. Howard Saint, the man of one facial expression. Howard Saint, the man of his own demise because he got a little jealous and destroyed the two people closest to him. I am pitching Howard Saint as the worst villain because he is just he went out in the lamest way I have ever seen in a Marvel movie. He's boring. He's bland. John Travolta does zero acting, and even beyond the zero acting, it's hard not to look at him and go, John Travolta, what are you doing? You're John Travolta. He takes away from the character, which isn't much of a character to begin with. And even just on paper, he's boring. He's a mob boss whose son dies, and for some reason he blames the Punisher and not the man who actually killed his son. He's stupid. He's lame. He makes no sense. Howard Saint is actually pretty awful, and I don't like Tim's choice.
But now we go over to Tim for his opening. 90 seconds is on the clock, and time will begin when you start talking.
Before I get to my pick, I just have a couple things to say. Just because John Travolta is bad in the movie, that's not part of the question. The question is about the worst villain, and so just because he's not acting well doesn't mean that's it. It should be what's on paper and what the character actually does and says. So my character that I picked is Vuk, which also sounds a lot like puke or Fook or something horrible from Dark Phoenix. This is Jessica Chastain's character in the latest released Dark Phoenix. So spoiler alert, sorry everybody, but she literally does nothing. And you want to talk about a character like Howard Saint, who actually does a lot of things, a lot of interesting things as a villain. This character does nothing. She walks around with Jean and whispers things in her ear that are irrelevant to the outcome of the movie or the plot, and then yells a couple times. She's actually not even Jessica Chastain. She's just like some weird alien that has no connection to the X-Men, whatever. A great villain has a connection to the hero involved, and this character in Dark Phoenix, Vuk, just doesn't do anything. She's useless and a waste of time in an otherwise okay movie, but she brings it down to a terrible movie.
And the opening is done. We've got two terrible villains on the table. I don't know how either of them are going to manage to defend the other one, but we'll find out because the 5-minute free round does start. You've got 5 minutes on the clock. Time will begin when you start talking.
Okay, first of all, Dark Phoenix would not have been an otherwise okay movie without Jessica Chastain.
That's not the question, but that's okay.
I know. Just first of all, just getting that out of the way. Second of all, I do think that acting is part of it. I think terrible acting can ruin an otherwise great villain on paper. So I do think we have to take into account John Travolta's acting. But even without John Travolta's acting, if you want to just talk about what's on paper, Jessica Chastain has a purpose. Her empire, all her people were destroyed, and now she's trying to get the force that destroyed it in order to bring it back. That's a purpose. Howard Saint's purpose is his son died, so I'm going to go after a guy who really didn't even have anything to do with it. He was just undercover at the scene where he got killed. So if you want to talk about connections, he really doesn't have one. He kind of
if that's the purpose of her character, it didn't come across, and it comes across in a 2-minute scene of a giant CGI where she just shows things in a room. That's pointless. At least Howard Saint, when he's a menacing man, and when he suspects something, he just goes and fucking, we could swear on this, right? I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to, but yeah, but he goes and just murders people because he's that menacing and that scary of a person. He's a mob boss that doesn't take any risks, any shit from anybody. He goes and does what he wants, and that is scary in a villain because it's unpredictable. This character in Dark Phoenix is predictable. You know everything she's gonna do from a mile away. She dies in the stupidest way that you could see in any other X-Men movie ever. It's just bland and dumb, where at least Howard Saint makes a movie that isn't great better, unlike Vuk, which makes a movie that's okay terrible.
Again, you said yourself that's not part of the question, but I will reiterate, Dark Phoenix would not be an otherwise okay movie without it. I think Sophie Turner is not good as Jean Grey. I think Mystique dying is really stupid. I think there are a lot of other problems in that movie. But regardless, Jessica Chastain does not die in a crazy way. She dies by the Phoenix Force. She dies trying to get the Phoenix Force. On paper, what you're talking about, that sounds really cool, and it actually looked cool. It had decent visuals, like it was fine.
But tell me you didn't see it coming from a mile away. At least with John Travolta and Howard Saint, you knew you didn't know what was going to happen.
I knew he was going to die at the end.
Okay, fine. You know that the hero's going to win at the end. Yeah, but you didn't know how and what kind of way.
Yeah,
what you were talking about in the beginning about how he just like does things that don't make any sense. That's the point of the movie, is that Frank Castle is so good at manipulating, and he manipulates Howard Saint the whole time to get him to do exactly what he doesn't want to do. And that's the point. And then Howard Saint goes crazy and becomes this crazy villain who's just killing people, and that's scary in a villain. Vuk doesn't do anything. She doesn't do anything in the movie on paper or in Jessica Chastain, whatever.
No, she has a purpose. She's actually somewhat sympathetic. And I know you say it's only a 2-minute scene, but at least it's there. I'm telling you, Howard Saint literally he's stupid. He gets it wrong. The person who killed his son, he doesn't even go after. He goes after someone else. And here's how he dies, since we're talking about how he dies. He gets chained to a car while the car rolls at about 3 miles an hour into a field of other cars, and then it blows up and it becomes the Punisher logo.
One scene at the end where he goes out kind of, I'll admit, kind of like stupid, doesn't make the rest of what he does in the movie bad. That's just one thing. Where and you say that she has a purpose. Okay, she has a purpose. It does not come across well, and it does not translate to screen well. You know what Howard Saint wants from beginning of that movie to the end of that movie. You are with him the entire time. Vuk, you don't understand what, and that scene too is in the last 20 minutes of the movie.
1 minute warning.
No, okay. So first of all, you're talking about things that don't come across. The Punisher coming across as manipulative does not work because it makes Howard look stupid. And if it's that easy for him to manipulate him by saying, he didn't even show him evidence or anything. He just had someone tell him like, oh, hey, I think your wife's being cheated on. And they put an earring in there. Like a smart villain would be like, hey, dude, did you cheat on my wife? And if you did, then I'll throw you on the train tracks. Then I'll stab you, whatever.
I'm not trying to say that he's a good villain. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say he's a good villain, but he at least is doing things. He's at least being.
He's telling other people to go do things.
No, he's the one who throws his wife on the freaking train tracks.
The stupidest thing because she didn't do anything.
But at least he's doing something, and he's scary, and he's like freaking out the audience because now if he does this to his wife, what could he do to Frank or to his other friends that live in the apartment? That's scary stuff. Vuk, you are never afraid of her.
Time on the round, time, my friends.
There we go. And that was a really heated debate. But it's time to go into the closings, and because Nicholas started first in the opening, Tim, you're going to start first on the closing. 1 minute begins when you start talking.
I think that Howard Saint isn't a great villain. I'm not denying that. But compared to Vuk, he's like Gandhi. He's like the greatest thing since sliced bread. He's amazing. He at least does things in his movie. He's intimidating. He's scary. You've seen him kill multiple people, including his wife. Whether it's for a dumb reason or not, that's an intimidating villain. And you're afraid of what he is going to do next. At every step, he's so crazy, you don't know what is going to happen next. And that's scary. Vuk, her name is Vuk. And she walks around and talks like this and just kind of touches people's heads, wants some sort of magical spirit cloud thing to save her people. It's stupid. And it had no consequence on the end of the movie. The movie would have ended the same way with or without her. She's irrelevant to the movie. Howard Saint needs to be in The Punisher for the movie to work. Vuk does not need to be in Dark Phoenix.
Before my time, spot on impression. That's really good.
And so, Nicholas, time for you to wrap it up into a nice bow. 1 minute begins when you start talking.
You're wrong. Jean Grey needed some character to fill that role, to push her one way so that she could eventually overcome it and become the Phoenix Force. Not a great movie. I didn't love the movie. It would not have been good without Jessica Chastain. And at least Jessica Chastain at her worst. I'm sorry. I know you don't like the acting, but the acting has to come into it. Jessica Chastain's worst acting is miles above John Travolta's worst acting. And it's terrible. He's not scary. He has the same face. He talks like this. Kind of similar? No? Okay. I'm not good at impressions. But he dies in the worst way. He goes out on his – I'm sorry. There's nothing worse in a villain than literally like shooting yourself in the foot. And that's what he does, is he gets rid of the people around him because he literally heard that someone was cheating on his wife. His wife was cheating on him. It's stupid. He doesn't do anything. He tells other people to go kill other people, and it's for stupid reasons. He doesn't – I cannot reiterate enough how he doesn't go after the guy that actually shoots his son. It's kind of crazy. But it's a bad movie. He goes out in a bad way. Book is – not great, but she's fine. She's a good actress. She
Time.
Whew. There was a heated debate, and it definitely was interesting. Joe, I'm going to go to you first. Who are you going to give you?
Based on impressions, please. Tim's was way better than mine.
So I heard a lot of back and forth between both competitors on why theirs was bad. And Nick, actually, he won me in his closing argument when he brought up that John Travolta as Howard Saint is a bad character because he just makes a lot of stupid decisions that don't make sense, and he goes out in a bad way, and he shoots himself in his own foot. And while Vuk at least does something and has a reason to be there, to be a villain, while Howard Saint really doesn't. So Nick's getting my vote on this one.
Yeah, and I'm going to go next on this. This was pretty close. And my vote's probably going to go to Nick as well, because I do feel he managed to somehow defend Vuk, even though, like, in my head, I agree that Vuk is probably the worst of the two. He somehow managed to find a way to defend Vuk and say that, like, she needed to be there to push Jean Grey over the edge. One thing I did wish he did say, though, is go that, like, the reason Vuk's thing didn't work is because of the writing and not because of the act, like, portrayal. But that regardless, Nick still gets my point. But there's still 2 questions left. It is currently tied 1-1. And your next question is, besides Thor and Korg, what other MCU character do you think would also play Fortnite? Tim's going to go first on this. 90 seconds is on the clock. Time begins when you start talking.
So when I think of Fortnite, I think of tween boys yelling into microphones, like Korg and Thor and Meek. At the time we see them in Endgame, there are a couple of, Thor's in a rough spot, and it makes sense that he'd be, sitting around drinking and yelling at Fortnite because it's a lame thing. And the fact that who is the lamest, douchiest person in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that would, of course, be the stereotypical Fortnite player? That's Flash Thompson from Spider-Man. He's the dude who yells "Penis Parker" a bunch of times. He's a cock. He's rude and insensitive, and that's what you want out of a Fortnite player. It's not just someone who is a gamer. It's someone who's just like genuinely like, oh, I play Fortnite. And I think that he would just fit the bill so well of being the guy who would be sitting around playing Fortnite, making fun of Penis Parker. So that's why I picked Flash Thompson.
And we go to Nick. Nick, 9 seconds is on the clock. Time begins when you start talking.
So I do not play Fortnite. My college roommate, however, played a lot of Fortnite. First of all, Thor and Meek are not tween boys. I don't know what we're talking about there. And second of all, my character not only is most likely to play Fortnite, but I would bet money on the fact that he already has played Fortnite. Because I'm talking about Paul Rudd's Ant-Man. Yes, that's right. The character who was on house arrest for 2 years without a girlfriend because she hated him, with only seeing his daughter once a week, and he ran out of things to do. He started playing kids bowling. I'm telling you, at least at one point in there, Paul Rudd's Ant-Man, Scott Lang, was playing Fortnite at some point. Flash Thompson might be the stereotypical person you think of, but he would try everything to appear as not that. He spends time driving his dad's car, DJing parties. He is the stereotypical I'm too cool for this kid at high schools. And that's why Flash Thompson would never play it, and Paul Rudd definitely has. Scott Lang.
And we've got Scott Lang versus Flash Thompson in the Fortnite battle. But now 5 minutes is on the clock. Time begins when someone starts talking.
Have you ever seen a 50-year-old man try to play video games? It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, a 2-year-old trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. There's no way that he's sitting there playing Fortnite. There's nothing that shows Scott Lang is a gamer. What we do see him do is read books, play the drums, watch movies. That's plenty of stuff to keep him interested. There's no way Scott Lang is going to sit down, and also worrying about his daughter and Hope and Hank. And he's way too busy to sit down and play Fortnite. He's got other stuff. Yeah, he's on house arrest, but just because you're on house arrest and stuck in a house doesn't mean that you automatically are going to be a gamer. He's just not. Flash Thompson is a high school student who has DJs and stuff, but that kind of thing of too cool, that's kind of out, that kind of left. I'm 23 years old, and when I was in high school, like the cool kids, the football players, they also played video games and Fortnite and stuff. So that comparison doesn't really work for me.
Well, I'm 23 also, and I will say they didn't. The jocks in my high school did not do that. They were out doing whatever they had to do, and they wouldn't be playing Fortnite, especially Flash Thompson. You think he's too cool for it. Paul Rudd, the whole beginning of Ant-Man and the Wasp is how he's so bored. He's literally taking online magic classes. He's doing everything possible to keep himself occupied because he's got nothing to do. I guarantee you Fortnite, which would be a huge trend at the time, he would give it a shot. And
I think if we saw...
First of all, can we get a fact check? I don't think he's 50.
Paul Rudd is 50. Paul Rudd's 50 years old. So
I feel like
that's why I went with that. He might not be exactly 50 years old, but he's not in his 30s. He's got to be in his 40s or 50s.
I think Scott Lang's probably in his mid 30s.
Whatever, that doesn't count. The fact that doesn't matter in here. I'm talking the fact that if we had maybe seen Scott Lang playing a different video game, I could tend to believe that he might play Fortnite, but we don't. We see him learning magic because it's something his daughter would enjoy. We see him reading books. Fault in Our Stars, a book that probably he could talk about with his daughter because she's around that age where reading books like that, those pre-teen books, he's doing things that make sense to him and his character. There's nothing in any Ant-Man or Avengers movie that would insinuate that Scott Lang would be someone who would play a video game, let alone Fortnite. Whereas Flash Thompson has it written all over his fucking forehead because he is that douchey kid. And it doesn't mean that I play video games. You don't have to be a douche, exclusively a douche to play video games. But I'm just saying,
that's very true.
Yes, but what I am saying is that he's the type of kid who is so douchey and so too cool for school that he wouldn't care because he can DJ and also play Fortnite. He's that kind of kid. Scott is not that kind of man.
No, dude, Flash cares more than any other person in that school what other people think about him. And if I'm going too psychological right now, I guarantee you it's all a front. and he wouldn't play Fortnite just because it would damage his reputation, and that's the most important thing to him. So Flash would never do it. Scott Lang is a thief. Scott Lang works with technology and electricity. That sounds like Fortnite to me.
No, I mean, and to rebuttal that, I mean,
to pull off a heist. The tactical, you're telling me he wouldn't sit down and find that enjoyable? I guarantee you he would.
I'm saying that maybe, but he's not, because we've already had the proof that he doesn't play video. There's nothing that he does in any of the movies.
We see a montage of 8 minutes. They're not going to show us
everything. He's watching Netflix. You're telling me there's not 2 years worth of Netflix movies and TV shows that he could have been, and books and reading and learning
and being
with his daughter
for hours straight and been dying to do something else? Yes, he does stuff for his daughter who he gets to see once a week. But what does
he do from movie to movie that would show you that he would ever be the type of man to sit down and play video games? We've seen Tony sit down and play video games. That makes sense because he's more of a because Tony is the type of character that, you know, it is actually working on stuff all the time and needs to sit down and just kind of like hit some buttons. Scott Lang is a guy who's just, he's a father. Take away what you think about his genius ability, because he's a dad first and foremost. And I'm sorry, but dad, no, he is a dad first and foremost.
Goofy kid at heart.
No, he is a dad in heart, in person, in everything. Everything he does is for his daughter, 100%. Whereas everything
for his daughter, bowling.
Again, going back to your point, 2 years of house arrest. 2 years of house arrest. Yes, those are fun things that he could do with his daughter. Whereas Flash, it makes complete sense, because you're saying that he just wants to fit in and look cool? What is cool right now? Fortnite. So of course he's going to play it so he can walk and tell it. Whether we think it's cool or not doesn't mean it's not cool right now. He would walk around and be, hey guys, you want to play Fortnite?
Time, my friends, time.
Good job, Tim.
And I couldn't find out how old Scott Lang is, but assuming that he's the same old age as the actor, he is exactly. Paul Rudd is 50. So
okay. Holland isn't 14.
Well, yeah, no, I know. There was nothing that sort of said how old Scott Lang is in the MCU. So can only assume that he's about the same age as how old Paul Rudd is. But regardless, we've still got the closings to do after that. But so Tim started the opening, so Nick's go first on the closing. 1 minute is on the clock.
Here are all the things that point to Scott Lang wanting to play video games. He's a thief. He likes strategy. He would love strategic video games. He had nothing to do for 2 years. He would eventually wander over to Fortnite. He likes technology. He got a degree in engineering. There's no reason he wouldn't like button mashing just like Tony Stark. Flash Thompson is too cool for Fortnite. He would think that himself. He wouldn't want to do it. He's too busy DJing. He's too busy out at parties, going to proms. He's too busy trying to be cooler than he is. That's why Flash Thompson would never do it. Scott Lang had nothing to do for 2 years. I cannot reiterate that more. He saw his daughter once a week. There's no way everything he did in the other 6 days was for his daughter. He did things for himself. And if Fortnite was popular around the time, which it was when he was on house arrest, he would have found his way to it. Whether he liked it or not, he definitely would have played it, and he would have liked the strategy because he's a thief. And also, Tim's choice is bad.
And now we go over to Tim for his closing. 1 minute is on the clock. Time begins when you start talking.
Once again, my opponent is getting caught up on one thing, and that's that Scott Lang was on house arrest for 2 years. And just because you are good with technology or good with whatever doesn't mean that you're naturally going to go to video games. So if you want to make that stretch, sure, but that doesn't work for me. And the fact that there's nothing in any of the movies that would point to Scott Lang being a gamer, I just don't see it. Just because he's on house arrest for 2 years doesn't mean that he's automatically going to eventually get to Fortnite. There's plenty of other things you could do. Whereas Flash Thompson is a high school student. He's a guy who, like my opponent said, wants to look cool and wants to fit in. And that's what's in right now. That's what's in for gamers. So naturally he would do that. He would make the time to do it, to talk about it, because that's the type of character that he is. Scott Lang would never be a gamer. He's too busy with other things, and he's also helping run a company at the beginning of Ant-Man and the Wasp, so he wouldn't have time to help do other things like Fortnite.
Time.
All right. So this was a fun battle. This was definitely very interesting and very close. But ultimately, my point's going to go to Tim on this one because I think he managed to nail back that Scott, because Scott was on House First, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to Fortnite. That he's got enough movies on Netflix and plays the drums, and we've seen him do other things. And the one in company is he just wouldn't have time for that. So yeah, so my point's going to go to Tim on this one. Troy, I'm going to go to you. Who's your point going to go to?
I really like this argument. When I saw both answers, I went, "Yep, that's perfect." Yeah, Scott's on house arrest. He'd have plenty of time to get around to it, like Nick said. All that time, all the stuff he's doing, you'd think he'd have time to get around to it. Plus, he's an engineer, so he likes the building stuff there. And then Flash, that's Penis Parker. Yeah, he's a total douche. It's stereotypical Flash. You figured that'd be something he'd play because it's popular at the time. Nick made a great point. Flash would be too busy with all the other stuff to do. He's too cool for it. He's too vain. He wouldn't need to do that. Tim had a great point. Scott's old. Scott probably wouldn't do it. And I think most importantly, we actually don't see Scott play. We see him do lots of things like the stupid bowling, the online magic school, but we don't actually see him play it. You could have thrown that in like they did in Thor, like in Avengers. And I think that was the biggest point. As much as they both like to play, we never really see Scott play it, and Flash totally would be the type. Like he said, Fortnite's cool right now, and it's totally up Flash's alley. So I'm going Tim with Penis Parker. Flash Thompson.
And with that, Tim does get the point on this one. But it's time to go into the potentially final question. This is a must-get for Nick to go to the speed run. But the question is, what is the best action sequence in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy? And Nick, you're going first on the opening. 90 seconds is on the clock. Time begins when you start talking.
I know what you might be thinking. Nick didn't get first choice on this question, but you're wrong. I chose the Sandman versus Black Suited Spider-Man in Spider-Man 3. Yes, a shitty, terrible movie. Terrible movie. I do not like the movie at all, but this action sequence is actually really good. You can knock the CGI, but I'll knock it right back in Tim's choice because all the CGI does not hold up in the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, unfortunately. The best thing about the Black Suited Spider-Man scene versus Sandman is it incorporates Sam Raimi's strengths, and that's horror. You have Black Suited Spider-Man creeping around the sewers, and it really gives off that effect, at least at the time, and it holds up more so than I think Tim's choice does. There's really cool action between the trains, and you get to see Sandman use his powers in a pretty cool way. Especially my favorite shot is when Spider-Man holds his face up against the train as you see it sort of sand away. I think there are really cool shots. I think there's pretty cool action. I think there's cool emotion behind it after Spider-Man having felt the weight of knowing that Flint Marko actually killed his uncle and not the other person who he had thought. So it's a fight filled with passion. It has good action. It has good horror elements, which is Sam Raimi's strength. And it takes place in a cool place. And Tim's choice is bad.
Nick's just staying on brand here. But Tim, 90 seconds is on the clock, and time begins when you start talking.
I'm not going to bring the quality of the CGI into it because that is dumb because, of course, the movies are 10, 15 years old. But my opponent's choice, is there's a lot of CGI in it. And what I mean by that is characters are swinging around. There's so much stuff in your face. Sometimes it's hard to tell what's even happening and the emotional weight behind it. I mean, I'm sorry, but I was so uninvested by that point that it might be a good action sequence, but I'm so uninvested in the movie by that point, I don't care. Whereas in Spider-Man 2, I'm picking the train fight with Doc Ock. You're so invested in the story at this point of the movie that you are completely with Peter and with Otto because you kind of are, you see his point of view, you see Peter's point of view, that everything is just clashing right here on the train and then ending with Peter saving the train as well. It's just an excellent action sequence with beginning to end, and the emotion, you're actually invested because it's been a great movie the whole time. Whereas this scene from Spider-Man 3, you just don't care by the time that comes up because it retcons something from the movie we already loved and puts something forced into a movie that hasn't been great. The Spider-Man 2 train scene is by far the best one.
All right. But yeah, now we go on to the freeform debate. 5 minutes is on the clock. Time begins when someone starts talking.
If you've seen the movie before, I agree you might not be invested, but that scene happens very early on in the movie. Personally, when I saw it for the first time, I was still giving it a chance. And it's still the best action scene. And the Doc Ock scene reuses stuff from the Green Goblin. He holds up the two people and makes Spider-Man choose between saving the train. And then I wrote my biggest point. I might as well just get it out of the way, but this says Tobey Maguire's face ruins that entire action scene at the end. When
No.
It has become a meme. Yeah, it's been memed. It's literally used to describe someone taking a dump. It ruins it for me. It's bad practical effects. You see him holding the webs; they're very clearly not webs. And you can say there's more.
You said you weren't going to bring the quality of the effects into it, so I don't know why you're doing that now.
The CGI, the quality of the CGI.
Practical effects, CGI, it doesn't matter. We're talking about the quality of the scene itself, and just if you're not going to bring the quality of bad CGI into it, bringing in quality of bad practical effects is just as bad. Okay. And that scene in Spider-Man 3 is, I guarantee it, halfway to over halfway through the movie because he doesn't get the black suit till about halfway through. And I believe that is the second time he's in the black suit. So that being said, that scene, like I said, is just, there's no emotional weight behind it. You claim there is because you just found out who the real Uncle Ben killer is. But I'm more angry at the fact that the writers and Sam Raimi decided to change that to try to get some sort of emotion out of me in this movie. Whereas in Spider-Man 2, the action is great. And I'm sorry if it's not a redo from the first one, but seeing Peter try to choose between people and then putting up all the webs and then saving the train, as well as also just fighting all of the amazing action with the arms going in between that bridge and everything. There's really cool stuff in there. Whereas Spider-Man 3, yeah, he kind of goes through the dark a little bit and then smashes his face on a train and then yells, "Good riddance." Ooh, great writing.
Okay, you say you can see Doc Ock's point of view. What point of view? He's literally being controlled by mechanical arms. I don't feel for Doc Ock in that moment. I'm not seeing an emotional battle. I'm not seeing a battle of views in that fight. I don't really care. I don't have emotion in that. And the Doc Ock just stands there. You can say it's great action, but it's not. He just stands there while. And also, by the way, one punch to Doc Ock should knock him out.
Action doesn't necessarily mean people have to be punching each other. It's an action sequence because they are fighting as well as he's trying to save people. Okay.
What I'm saying is,
so you can't use that as a dig on me because it's not the same.
I can because Doc Ock gets punched in that scene. So when I see that today and I go, Spider-Man in Spider-Man 3 lifts up the entire water thing, I'm going, how the hell is Doc Ock not unconscious?
That doesn't make any sense. Just okay. If that's the train of thought we're going with, then if that's the train of thought we're going here, then every single time a superpowered person punches another person, Captain Marvel punches Thanos in the head, he should be knocked out, if not dead. Okay, you take that with any character. That's getting real nitpicky. Trying to mask the fact that your scene isn't as good as mine.
Nope, Sandman can take a punch from Spider-Man, and he does, and I believe that it's a punch
because he's made of sand.
Exactly, it makes sense.
He's made of sand. So you punch him in the head, it's sand. It doesn't matter. And you're saying that there's no emotional weight to Doc Ock. The entire movie, he is made as the villain, but he's also made to be a sympathetic character because he doesn't want to be doing what what the arms are making him do. They are messing with his brain, and so he's doing these evil things, but every second he's questioning it, and then the arms switch and take over his brain. So yes, you're with him the entire time during this fight, because you're wondering, when is he going to switch back? Is he going to stop and maybe help Peter? And then the fact that Peter saves the train and everything, whether he's making a pooping face or not, it is classic. It's classic heroic Spider-Man. Seeing Spider-Man do something amazing, and what Spider-Man murders someone in your scene, cool. That's heroic in a Spider-Man film.
That's what black-suited Spider-Man is. That's the only look we get at actual black-suited Spider-Man from the comics. That's the only good part about Spider-Man 3. And then it gets bad later when Venom becomes Venom. But in that moment, it's really cool to see black-suited Spider-Man. And it has a horror aspect. It has different aspects. Yours is just the same. It rehashes stuff from the first Spider-Man, making Spider-Man choose. And then Tobey Maguire makes a stupid face at the end that literally, for me, kind of ruins the scene.
I think you're just saying that because it's become a meme. I bet when you saw the movie in the theater, if you did, because I did as a kid, and that scene was the greatest thing ever. And then 3 years...
Time.
And then...
Time.
Ooh, that definitely got really heated really quickly. But it's time to go to the closing.
We're talking about Spider-Man. We have to be heated.
But yeah, at the closing, Nicholas did the opening. So Tim, you go first in the closing.
Let's hear about the action too. Remember, it is the best action sequence. Let's hear about action.
Yeah. 1 minute on the clock. Tim, go ahead.
Thank you for bringing up the action. I was about to do that. Spider-Man, like I said, he has to, it's not just about punching people that makes great action. The train is moving at a high, fast pace, so you as the audience member are feeling that energy of the fast pace. He's saving people, fighting Doc Ock, flying between bridges, and saving the train all at the same time. And in this other action sequence that is being proposed, he smashes someone's face, kicks him, and then pours water on him. That's not a great action sequence. My competitor described my writing as being bad because Doc Ock took a punch. Okay, the writing in Spider-Man 3 of that scene is atrocious. The way that black-suited Spider-Man goes and just immediately wants to murder this person for something that's retconned. You don't have any emotion in it. So even if it was a good action scene, which it's not, you don't feel the weight. You feel the weight in the train sequence, and that's why it's such a good action scene. It has great action.
Time.
All right, and Nick, wrap it up into a nice bow, and just let's hear about the action.
Am I allowed to add time?
Was that so?
Am I allowed to add time onto this?
Yes, you are. You
Yes.
can add your 1 minute extender.
I would like to do that, please.
All right. Let me get it up. We're good.
Cool.
Yeah, I completely forgot to remind people about the times. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, I did the whole time. I was just waiting for the moment. Okay. Talking about the action, my scene has 2 trains. Boom, 2 better than 1. He smashes his face against a moving train. It's good action. You can see what happens. The action in the train scene is lame. Doc Ock just stands there. The arms really don't hold up. It's not as great as people make it out to be, and it's ultimately ruined by a stupid face. Sorry. In the Sandman versus black-suited Spider-Man, you get to see actual black-suited Spider-Man, and yes, you're emotionally invested because this is your Spider-Man, and he's acting out of character, and that's how you know the Venom symbiote is getting to him. And you get to see cool action. Sandman does a cool kick thing with his sand powers. You get to see that face smashed against the train. Spider-Man gets banged between 2 trains that are going at high velocities. And yes, you're emotionally invested. Maybe not on the second rewatch because you know it's a bad movie. But at the time of that moment, you think, oh my God, this is the person that actually killed Uncle Ben. And Spider-Man is clearly not himself. And that's why it's a cool action scene. It has other elements. Like I said, it has the horror of Spider-Man crawling around the sewer system. And it has Spider-Man thinking on his feet and thinking, okay, water is what's going to destroy this person. And in the end, it doesn't even destroy him. And Spider-Man then goes on the journey to realize he's no longer himself. And that's why he gets rid of the symbiote later. Yes, it's emotionally investing. Yes, it has good action. Yes, you can see what's happening just because it's set in a darker place. You can still see what's happening just about as much as you can see what's happening on the train sequence in Spider-Man 2. And I'm sorry, the writing is bad. If a human being gets punched by Spider-Man, he's no longer awake. That's the writing. If good writing would be not letting Peter close enough to punch Doc Ock in the face. Sandman is Not a bad villain. He's actually probably the best villain in Spider-Man 3. He eventually you become emotionally connected to him, and you feel in that moment for Spider-Man because he's not being himself anymore. Whether it's a retcon or not, you're seeing uses action from another movie already in the same series. Reused action is not good action, even if it's good the first time. I'd like to see more original things like an underground sewer scene using horror elements with 2 trains. That's right, 2 trains, not 1, and using Sandman's powers uniquely.
But that was definitely a fun, heated battle here. I'm going to start with Troy on this. Troy, who are you going to give your point to and why?
I think it was a heated closing. I was kind of admittedly a little bored through the first part. Obviously, I piped up at the end. You wanted to hear more about the action. I heard not too much at the beginning. Nick pointed out it was kind of had a good horror vibe, had some decent action with them getting beaten up between trains. But I think Tim kind of told us a little bit more about Spidey swinging between the bridges. And especially Tim had a great closing. I really switched over to his side talking about the fast-paced part of the train, how Spidey was saving people while fighting Doc Ock. And then Nick came back, and I think Nick really showed a lot of fight at the end. Smart, adding in the more time, and came right back at him. 2 trains, same amount of action with them fighting between them. Sandman had some good kicks in action himself, knocking Spidey around. It was a really tight one, but the fact that I was on Nick's side at the beginning and their closing arguments were so close, I'm going to still give Nick a slight edge. Go with Nick and Spidey 3, just by the little bit. That was probably the closest match so far. That was a good one.
Yeah, I'm going to go next on this. For me, my vote's going to go with Tim. I think he managed to kind of defend his action sequence more and getting a few good digs on there. I think they kind of got derailed in the middle of the main round when they brought the writing into it. And I just realised I used the term derail by accident. I did not because they were about trades.
Get out of here! He's out. Don't get to vote anymore.
But anyway, my vote goes to Tim. Joe, so it's down to you to be the tiebreaker.
Man, this is tough. Both had really strong arguments. I think what sold it for me in the end was Nick kind of brought up how Tim's action sequence was reused and was kind of like we had seen it before already, and it was better the first time around, so it really wasn't as good this time, as well as bringing up that we saw something new and interesting, and we really got to see Spider-Man act out a character and kind of be more aggressive and see him go pound for pound and just what he was able to do with it. So for that reason, I'm going to go for my vote is going to go with Nick on this one.
Right, which means we are going to go to the speed round. So how the speed round works is I've got a question that no one knows. And then you get 45 seconds as an opening, then you got 30 seconds, then you got a 20 seconds. I'll read the question twice, and then after the second time I read it, then say your name. Nicholas, I'll just get you to say Nick, just because that way. Because otherwise, it's going to take you ages to get your name out. Tim just has to say Tim. But yes, the question is, what is the worst X-Men film? And just to say it again, what is the worst X-Men film?
Tim.
Oh, Nick.
X-Men Origins Wolverine.
And Nick, what is your choice?
It's between 2, and I'm sure you can imagine which 2 they are.
Days of Future Past.
Yeah, that was it. No. Yeah, we're gonna do X-Men: The Last Stand.
We've got X-Men Origins Wolverine versus X-Men: The Last Stand. Because Tim said his name first, Tim goes first. So, 45 seconds is on the clock. And for the first round, just talk about your own movie. Don't worry about the other one. You can worry about those in the next later few rounds. So.
Clarifying, so we get 45 seconds to open, and there's no like back and forth round though, correct?
There's no back and forth round, no.
Okay.
And sorry, what did you just say about our own movie? Keeping it on our own?
So for your first opening the 45 seconds, just talk about your own movie and why it's bad. Then in the 30 seconds and the 20
Then kind
seconds,
of rebut after.
Okay.
you can yeah.
Cool.
And I'm going first, right?
Yep, Tim's goes first.
Okay.
So 45 seconds is on the clock, and
X-Men Origins Wolverine completely betrays everything about the character that we knew up to that point. It completely betrays every character in the movie. It takes comic book characters that we've loved for years and completely ruins them. It has terrible CGI, terrible acting, even from Hugh Jackman, a terrible villain. They sew fucking Deadpool's mouth shut. It's the worst written X-Men movie. It doesn't make any sense in the timeline of the rest of the X-Men movies. It just like paved the way for people to get off of the X-Men train. It's just a terrible movie from start to finish. There is nothing redeeming about it whatsoever. The story's terrible. Like I said, everything about it is just awful, and they completely betray the one thing that you wanted to see, and that's Wolverine, and they betray him as a character.
Time.
That was a lot of words.
it is. And Nick, for your 45 seconds starts when you begin talking.
X-Men The Last Stand betrays characters that you've known already. You have a history with them, and then it betrays them. That's terrible. It tries to fit in way too many comic storylines. The Cure, Dark Phoenix. It kills great characters off screen in stupid ways. That makes it mean completely nothing. It ruins the quality of the first two movies. X-Men The Last Stand, again, it kills off Charles Xavier, kills off Cyclops off screen. It kills Jean Grey, and it kind of hurts Wolverine too. Wolverine is sidelined in that movie. He's not Wolverine. He cries at the cry at the end. The "I love you" and the stab is just not Wolverine. It looks stupid. The ending scene is dumb. Magneto has his powers at the end. They fight with guns. They have a horde of mutants that are just
Time.
Right. And now we go down to 30 seconds. And now you can start rebutting the other people's movies. So 30 seconds on the clock. Tim, whenever you start talking, it'll start.
The Last Stand is a natural progression of the first two films. It goes in exactly where you thought it would. The progression makes sense. The fact that the characters die isn't a bad thing because it adds emotional weight to the movie so that you're more invested in the film and in the characters. Wolverine, he's in love with Jean in the first two movies, so him being sad and saying I love you makes complete sense. What doesn't make sense is him running around talking about how getting his name because some woman said that he's like a Wolverine in the sky and then sewing Deadpool's mouth shut. And then taking Liev Schreiber, a great actor.
Time.
And Nick, your 30 seconds begins when you start talking.
I love X-Men Origins Wolverine. The opening battle scene when they're fighting through every single war, that's the best scene in any X-Men movie. Come at me. Wolverine is only like that for like a 5-minute period, and then he's without his woman, and he becomes Wolverine again. I get that part's bad, but whatever. You have Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson in the beginning. That's a great moment. Great moment as first moment we see Deadpool. Yes, it ruins it later, but whatever. There's still good parts of the movie. It's kind of bad in a great way. I love watching it. It makes sense. That was the plot of X2. It's him trying to find out who did this Weapon X thing to him, and this is it happening. It's cool to see. Yes, he has to hunt down the members.
Time.
All right, and this is your last chance to convince us. Tim, you go first. 20 seconds is on the clock. Time.
Oh, I didn't realize we get more time. Okay. I'm just going to keep saying. Okay. So I was going to say Liev Schreiber is completely wasted. You got Gambit in there. Makes no sense. You've got a bunch. It changes genres from a comedy to an action to a horror all the time. The Last Stand, again, is a natural progression for the characters. It makes sense with the storyline of the characters. And I thought they actually pulled off the Cure thing really well. It's actually a pretty great X-Men movie.
And Nick, this is your last chance to convince us. 20 seconds begins when you start talking.
The Last Stand betrays characters way more. Magneto calls mutants pawns. He would never do that. Charles Xavier manipulates Jean Grey. He wouldn't do that throughout the first 2 movies. He loves his family. The Last Stand is terrible. X-Men Origin Wolverine. It's fun to watch Wolverine go around fighting these new characters who aren't ruined because we haven't seen them before. Whether or not they're ruined from the comics, that's different. These are the first time we're seeing them in the movies, and it's fun to watch. It's fun. Leaf Shivers
Time.
That was this is definitely a fun, quick battle. And Joe, who are you going to give your point to, and why?
This was probably this. You can both see both heated. They both really want this win. I'm going to actually have to go with Nick and I'm just going to say this out there first. I personally think X-Men Origins Wolverine is the worst of the 2 movies, but Nick brought up some good points about how it really, because how The Last Stand betrays characters that we have seen with the first 2 movies, and Origins only betrays characters from the comics, so that really doesn't matter. And Wolverine is cool to watch and it has cool action sequences, while there are just moments with Magneto calling people pawns and Charles manipulating people that just wouldn't happen in the first 2 movies. That makes it a worse movie. So Nick's getting my vote for this one.
Troy, who are you going to give your point to, and why?
That's a great question. Malcolm, I'm glad you asked me that question. I'm really glad you asked me. Thanks for bringing that up. I think Tim made some great points in the beginning. Origins got bad CGI, bad acting, bad villains. They kind of leave Schreiber for the most of it, and as always, they sew Deadpool's mouth shut. Nick made some points about The Last Stand, though. It doesn't just betray Wolverine like Origins. It betrays lots of characters, and actually, to be honest, 2 of the arguments I always try to make for it, yeah, it ruins Deadpool, but you get Wade in the beginning. You don't have any of it without him as Wade in the beginning, and it does have one of the best openings of all time, which features Lee. We've not wasted in that. So for many of the same reasons, I go Nick.
Which means Nick does get the point and the win. And your winner, and going on to the next round, is Nick. So Nick does get the win. So we're going to go to hear from our competitors now. Tim, I'll go to our unfortunate loser, Tim, first. Tim, how do you feel about this match?
Not great. I feel like I gave a little more defense on that last question and a little more offense than I was given credit for. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not the judge, so it doesn't really matter what I think. I do feel as if, though, that I gave a little bit more on that question and the Spider-Man question than I was given credit for. And I feel like there were some votes because I don't know. I'm not feeling great. I really thought I had that one in the end. Talking about, the natural progression of the characters, that was never brought up in either of the points that weren't given to me. So I'm a little confused on that one. But again, like I said, I'm not the judges. No hard feelings to the judges. That's why there's 3 judges. They all get to make their calls the way it is. So I would have liked to win this one. Obviously, everybody wants to win, but no hard feelings to anybody. It was fun. Yeah.
But yeah, so over to Nick now. Nick, how do you feel about how the match went?
First of all, could not give more hats off to Tim. It was a pleasure sharing the screen with him and fighting with him. Great dude. First time meeting him, but you seem like a great dude, Tim. I definitely felt the same way you felt in other rounds, but unfortunately, that's just the name of the game. Didn't think I was going to win. I totally lied about having the first pick of the action scene because, who wouldn't pick the train scene? But it was fun. I'm blown away. I'll try to represent Tim as best I can in the finals, and I look forward to it.
But yeah, I don't know who your next match is. I can't remember who it is, but you're facing
Oh,
someone. We've
Yeah.
got Cody here.
Yeah, that match is done. That match is over. That match was ended in the third round. That match was ended by KO. And yes, Nick, you'll be playing me next. So I look forward to playing you.
You got a nice beard, man.
Thank you. I look forward to playing you. I heard that last question. I will keep my opinions to myself, but that was a very interesting choice. I just hope you debate better than you did in that last question because you're going to need it when you play me.
Oh, shade. I love
I
it.
I should have had the feeling that's why you came in. No one told me anything that you're coming in. So yeah.
I was really confused too because I don't really know what a speed round is. So that would be fun. If I actually get to play one of those for once, I would like to see a speed round. But
you're good at this. All right,
I like ending it early. So yeah, that's
I'll hold your hand through the speed round.
All right, cool.
If we make it that far, no, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, so yeah, Cody and Nick in the final. This is going to be really interesting because Cody is really great at debating. He's not the champion for a reason, so that's going to be really interesting. But with that, we've come to an end. So from Joe, from Troy, from Nick, from Tim, from everyone here, we'll see you next time on the Battleground.